in a small courtroom tucked away in a quiet corner of Ohio. The atmosphere was thick with tension as the presiding judge prepared to deliver her verdict. The case at hand seemed straightforward. A man named Robert Lawson was accused of trespassing after being caught sleeping behind a grocery store. There were no weapons involved, no drugs, and no one was harmed. It was a minor offense that the court could easily squeeze into its busy schedule. However, as the deputies escorted Robert into the room, a palpable shift occurred. Robert appeared disheveled, his oversized coat hanging off him in tatters, the sleeves engulfing his hands. He wore a faded military shirt with the name Lawson stitched across the chest, one pant leg tucked into an old combat boot, while the other leg dragged behind him, torn and muddy. He looked like a man who hadn't found a proper bed in months. As the bailiff announced, docket number 45832, State versus Robert Lawson, the tension in the room escalated. The sound of his name reverberated off the walls, triggering whispers among the spectators. The judge, a woman named Alice Winters, looked up from her papers, her expression shifting from indifference to surprise as she registered the name. "Did you say Lawson?" she inquired, her tone softening. "Yes, ma'am," replied the bailiff, glancing at the paperwork. "Age 58. Alice paused, her gaze lingering on Robert, who stared blankly at the floor, his eyes hollow and lost. The courtroom fell silent, tension mounting as the public defender, a young man named David Hart, cleared his throat nervously. "Your Honor, Mr. Lawson is requesting release under his own recognizance. He has no prior violent charges, and the officers noted that he didn't resist arrest. He simply didn't want to leave the property." But before David could continue, the judge raised her hand, silencing him. "Mr. Lawson, can you hear me?" Robert lifted his head slightly to meet her gaze. "Yes, ma'am," he replied, his voice rough, like gravel scraping against pavement. Then, unexpectedly, a man in the back of the courtroom stood up. No one had prompted him to do so, yet one by one, others began to rise. Several wore jackets adorned with military patches. A woman in the corner displayed a Navy emblem on her scarf. They stood in solidarity, a quiet yet powerful show of respect. Even the bailiff, typically stoic, straightened and joined them. The courtroom felt alive with unspoken understanding, a collective recognition of something significant unfolding. Judge Winters took a deep breath, her voice now gentle. "Mr. Lawson, are you the same Robert Lawson from the 1991 Desert Shield operation?" He nodded slowly. "Used to be." The transformation in the room was palpable. They were no longer looking at a vagrant, but rather a man who had once led troops through chaos during the Gulf War. The murmurs grew louder as people began to realize the gravity of the situation. "Did she say Desert Shield? Robert Lawson? That's him!" one voice exclaimed as the courtroom leaned in, captivated by the revelation. As the court clerk pulled up Robert's military record on her monitor, revealing a history decorated with honors, including the Silver Star, Judge Winters's brow furrowed in disbelief. "Mr. Lawson, you received these medals?" she asked, astonished. Robert's voice was barely audible. "I didn't keep count, ma'am." David, the public defender, leaned closer. "Sir, you never mentioned any of this." Robert shrugged. "Didn't think it mattered." A man named Charles, a fellow veteran, stepped forward, his presence commanding attention. "Permission to approach, Your Honor." Alice gestured for him to continue. "I served under Mr. Lawson," Charles stated firmly. "He saved my life in the heat of battle. I was sure I wouldn't make it out, but he wouldn't let me go." More voices chimed in, each recounting their own stories of Robert's bravery, how he had been the anchor in their darkest moments. As the courtroom began to piece together the man before them, the air was thick with a mix of respect and confusion. How had a decorated hero ended up here, facing such a minor charge? Judge Winters remained silent for a moment, her hands clasped tightly, reflecting on the weight of the law, juxtaposed with the life of a man who had given so much. The atmosphere shifted again, now charged with the realization that Robert Lawson's story was far more complex than anyone had anticipated. In this moment of collective reflection, Robert Lawson was not just a name on a docket. He was a testament to the struggles faced by many veterans. The room began to understand that behind every name lies a story, a history that deserves to be heard. It was a reminder that sometimes all it takes is a little compassion to reach out and make a difference in someone's life. With the courtroom still buzzing with newfound respect, it became clear that a simple act of recognition could lead to profound change. As the proceedings continued, the question lingered: how could they help this man rediscover his worth? As you watch and listen to stories like Robert's, remember the importance of reaching out to those who have served. A simple gesture of kindness or a listening ear can transform lives. If you know a veteran struggling, don't hesitate to extend your hand. It might just be the lifeline they need. As the courtroom settled into an unusual silence, the gravity of Robert Lawson's situation became increasingly apparent. Once a proud soldier, Robert now faced the stark reality of being perceived as a mere vagrant, a man trapped in his past and struggling to find his place in a world that had seemingly forgotten him. Judge Alice Winters sat at the bench, her heart heavy with the weight of the man before her. She'd understood that this was not merely a case of trespassing, but a poignant reflection of the struggles faced by many veterans returning from service. Robert's life story began to unfold in bits and pieces as he spoke, his voice steady yet filled with the weight of unspoken sorrow. After being honorably discharged from the Army in 1993, he tried to reintegrate into civilian life. But the transition proved to be an uphill battle. He had served in the Gulf War, where he had been a leader, someone who inspired confidence and bravery in the men under his command. Yet now, he stood before the judge, a shadow of his former self, haunted by memories that refused to fade. David Hart, the young public defender, leaned in closer, eager to grasp the full scope of Robert's plight. "Sir, if you could tell the court what happened after you returned home, it might help us understand your circumstances better," he encouraged gently. Robert looked up, his eyes momentarily glistening with unshed tears. "I tried to go home, but that place no longer felt like home to me," he admitted, his voice wavering slightly. "I got married, had a daughter, but the nightmares and the silence, they drove her away." As Robert spoke, the demeanor of the spectators shifted. Many in the gallery had served in the military themselves, and they could relate to the struggles of adjusting to life outside the battlefield. They exchanged glances, their expressions a mixture of empathy and shared pain, recognizing in Robert their own struggles or the struggles of friends they had lost. The young veterans in the audience nodded knowingly, understanding the challenges that came with reintegration, those invisible wounds that often festered long after the physical battles had ended. After my wife left, I tried various jobs, security, delivery, maintenance, but each time something would trigger me, a loud noise, a sudden movement. It was like I was back in the war, Robert continued, his voice gaining strength as he recounted his experiences. I'd shut down or lash out, and eventually, employers stopped calling. The frustration in his voice resonated with many who had found themselves in similar positions, grappling with how to be seen not just as a veteran, but as a person worthy of second chances. The judge listened intently, her expression reflecting both compassion and determination. She understood that Robert's situation was not unique. It was a systemic issue affecting countless veterans. "Did you seek help from the VA?" she asked, her tone gentle but probing. Robert shook his head slightly, a bitter smile crossing his lips. "I tried, but the paperwork got lost. Calls went unanswered. After a while, people stop seeing you. You become a problem, not a person." A murmur rippled through the courtroom as Robert's words sank in. People shifted in their seats, some visibly moved by his honesty. It was evident that they were beginning to see beyond the man sitting before them and were starting to grasp the complexities of his life, how a decorated soldier had been reduced to living on the streets, battling the ghosts of his past without the support he had desperately needed. Judge Winters, after a moment of reflection, addressed Robert once more. "Mr. Lawson, do you have anywhere safe to go if you were released today?" she asked, her voice steady. He offered a sad smile, tinged with resignation. "The only safe place I ever knew was in that Humvee, and it got blown to pieces." The weight of his words hung heavily in the air, a stark reminder of the sacrifices made by those who served. As the judge contemplated his fate, David Hart seized the opportunity to advocate for Robert. "Your Honor, this is not just a criminal case. It's a cry for help that has been ignored for far too long," he asserted, his voice firm and unwavering. The prosecutor, Denise Rowan, who had remained focused and diligent throughout the proceedings, paused her note-taking, allowing the gravity of the situation to sink in. She looked at Robert, her expression softening. The atmosphere in the courtroom shifted once more. It was a moment of unity. People were no longer merely spectators, they were witnesses to a man's struggle, a reminder of the sacrifices made by veterans and the ongoing battle many face long after the war has ended. The realization that Robert's story was not just his own, but a reflection of countless others, created a powerful bond among those present. In that moment, Judge Winters made a decision. "We will take a recess," she announced, tapping her gavel softly. The courtroom buzzed with quiet conversations, not of gossip or judgment, but of respect and understanding for a man who had once been a hero. As the spectators filed out, whispers of support filled the air, echoing the sentiment that Robert Lawson deserved not only recognition, but also a second chance. As you reflect on stories like Robert's, consider how you can make a difference in the lives of veterans in your community. Reach out, listen, and offer support. Every act of kindness can help bridge the gap between their past and the future they deserve. As the courtroom reconvened, an air of anticipation enveloped the room. Robert Lawson remained at the defense table, his demeanor unchanged. The same oversized coat hung from his shoulders, a stark reminder of the disconnection between who he had been and who he was now. Yet, the atmosphere had shifted. The spectators were no longer viewing him as just another case. They were beginning to recognize the man behind the struggle, a veteran whose life had been irreparably altered by his experiences. Judge Alice Winters took her seat again, her eyes scanning the room, absorbing the collective energy. She knew this was a pivotal moment, not just for Robert, but for everyone present. "Mr. Lawson," she began, her voice steady yet compassionate, "I want to understand more about your life after you left the service. What happened to you after your honorable discharge?" Robert looked up, his gaze distant as he began to recount the years that followed his military service. "After I came home," he said slowly, "everything changed. I tried to reintegrate, but the memories, they wouldn't leave me alone." There was a tremor in his voice, a hint of vulnerability that resonated with the audience. "I thought I could just pick up where I left off, but I was wrong. My wife, she tried to help, but I couldn't be the man she needed. I was lost in my own mind. As Robert spoke, the spectators leaned in, captivated by his honesty. Many of them had faced similar struggles, and they understood the profound impact of trauma on a person's life. A few veterans in the back nodded in solidarity, their expressions reflecting the shared pain of battling inner demons. The silence in the courtroom was heavy, filled with empathy and understanding. "Did you seek help from the Veterans Affairs?" Judge Winters asked, her tone gentle yet probing. Robert shook his head, a bitter smile playing on his lips. "I did, but it felt like I was fighting a different war. The paperwork was endless. Calls went unreturned. After a while, I just gave up. It was easier to disappear," he admitted, his voice cracking slightly. The room felt the weight of his despair. David Hart, the public defender, leaned forward, sensing the urgency of the moment. "Mr. Lawson, this isn't just a criminal case. This is about a man who has suffered for far too long. It's about a system that has failed him," he stated firmly. The prosecutor, Denise Rowan, who had been diligently taking notes, looked up, her expression softening. It was clear that she, too, was beginning to see Robert not just as a defendant, but as a person deserving of compassion and understanding. Judge Winters turned her attention back to Robert. "Mr. Lawson, if you were released today, do you have somewhere to go?" The question hung in the air, heavy with implications. Robert offered a sad smile, filled with resignation. "The only place I ever felt safe was in my Humvee, and that's gone now," he replied. The judge felt a pang of sorrow at his words, recognizing the depth of his isolation. The courtroom was silent, each person grappling with the realization that Robert's situation was a reflection of a broader issue affecting many veterans. They were not just statistics. They were individuals whose sacrifices had often gone unrecognized. Judge Winters looked around the room, her heart breaking for the men and women who had served their country yet were now struggling to find their way. Then, in a moment of inspiration, Judge Winters turned to the audience. "I want to ask anyone here who has served alongside Mr. Lawson, or who knows him, to step forward if they wish to speak." A moment of hesitation followed. Then a man named Charles, a fellow veteran, stood up. "Your Honor, I served with Robert. He saved my life during an ambush. He put himself in danger to pull me out. He deserves better than this," he said, his voice steady and filled with conviction. Another voice chimed in from the back. "I read about him in the news. He's a hero, not just for us, but for everyone who served. We need to help him, not punish him," a woman added, her voice rising with passion. As more voices joined in, the courtroom buzzed with a newfound energy, a collective determination to support Robert and bring attention to his plight. Judge Winters felt the shift in the room. It was no longer just about the law. It was about humanity. "I will consider all of this as I make my decision," she said, her tone resolute. "Mr. Lawson, you are not just a name on a docket. You are a man who has faced unimaginable challenges, and we need to address that." As the recess was called, the spectators began to file out of the courtroom, their conversations filled with hope and solidarity. Many expressed their desire to help Robert, to reach out and ensure he received the support he needed. It was a powerful moment, one that transcended the legal proceedings taking place. The realization that they could make a difference sparked a sense of purpose among those present. In the days that followed, the community rallied around Robert Lawson, determined to help him reclaim his life. They understood that the journey ahead would be difficult, but they were ready to stand by him. As they reached out, they reminded him that he was not alone, that his story mattered, and that together they could forge a path toward healing and redemption. As you reflect on Robert's journey, Consider how you can make a difference in the lives of veterans in your community. Reach out, listen, and offer your support. Your compassion could be the lifeline they need to begin their journey to recovery. As the courtroom reconvened after a brief recess, the atmosphere was charged with anticipation. Robert Lawson sat at the defense table, his eyes still cast downward, lost in thought. The support he had received from fellow veterans had ignited a flicker of hope within him. But the uncertainty of his future loomed large. Judge Alice Winters opened the session, her voice steady but filled with empathy. "Mr. Lawson," she began, "we've heard powerful testimonies about your past and the sacrifices you made for your country, but I need to understand more about your current situation. What led you to be here today?" Robert took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment. "After I got out of the Army, I tried to adjust to civilian life, but the memories never left me. I thought I could just move on, but the nightmares kept coming back," he confessed, his voice trembling slightly. "I tried to fit in, but the world felt different. My wife couldn't handle it. She left me, taking our daughter with her. I was alone and lost." As he spoke, the courtroom listened intently, the silence punctuated only by the soft rustling of papers. David Hart, his public defender, leaned forward, his expression a mix of determination and concern. "Mr. Lawson, when you say you were alone, can you elaborate on what that felt like?" Robert looked up, locking eyes with David for the first time. "It felt like I was invisible. I'd walk down the street, and people would just look through me. I wanted to shout, to tell them I was still here, that I mattered. But after a while, I stopped trying," he replied, his voice breaking. The judge nodded, her heart heavy with understanding. "And what about the support systems? Did you seek help from the VA or any other organizations?" she asked gently. Robert shook his head, a shadow of regret crossing his face. "I tried, but every time I reached out, I was met with more obstacles. Paperwork got lost, phone calls went unanswered. I started to think maybe it was easier to just fade away." The audience shifted uncomfortably, resonating with the feelings of despair and frustration that Robert expressed. The judge turned to the prosecutor, Denise Rowan, who had been quietly observing the proceedings. "Denise, what resources do we have available for veterans in situations like Mr. Lawson's?" Denise looked thoughtful before responding. "Your Honor, there are programs in place, but they often fall short. Many veterans struggle to navigate the system, and their needs go unmet. It's a complex web, and unfortunately, not everyone finds their way through." At that moment, another veteran, Charles, who had spoken earlier, stood up again. "Your Honor, I think we all know that Robert needs more than just a slap on the wrist. He needs real help," he said, his voice firm. "He should be directed to a Veterans Treatment Court program, where he can receive the support he desperately needs." Others in the courtroom nodded in agreement, their expressions resolute. The camaraderie among the veterans was palpable, and it was clear that they were willing to rally behind Robert, urging the court to consider a different approach. Judge Winters contemplated their words, her mind racing. "Mr. Lawson, if I were to consider a treatment program, would you be willing to participate?" she asked, her tone encouraging. Robert hesitated, uncertainty flickering in his eyes. I don't know if I'm worth that," he finally admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "You are worth it," the judge replied firmly. "You have served your country with honor, and now it's time for us to honor you by ensuring you get the help you need. This isn't just about punishment, it's about healing." The courtroom erupted in quiet murmurs of support, and Robert's expression slowly shifted. The realization that he was not alone began to sink in. "Okay, I'll try," he said, the words escaping his lips with a mixture of hope and doubt. "Excellent," Judge Winters said, a small smile breaking through her serious demeanor. "Then I will conditionally dismiss your charges upon successful completion of the treatment program. You will report to the Veterans Justice Outreach Program, where you will receive therapy, housing, and medical care." As she spoke, the atmosphere in the room transformed. It was no longer a space filled with judgment, but one brimming with possibility. Robert felt a sense of relief wash over him, a glimmer of hope that perhaps he could reclaim his life. As the proceedings wrapped up, the judge addressed the audience. "Let this case remind us all of the importance of compassion and understanding. Every veteran has a story worth hearing, and sometimes all it takes is a little kindness to help them find their way home." As people began to leave the courtroom, many approached Robert, offering words of encouragement and support. They expressed their willingness to help him navigate the challenges ahead, reminding him that he was not alone in this fight. In that moment, Robert Lawson understood that the path to healing would be long and difficult. But for the first time in years, he felt a sense of community and belonging. The journey was just beginning, but with the support of those around him, he knew he could take the first steps toward a brighter future. As you reflect on Robert's story, consider how you can make a difference in the lives of veterans in your community. Your support and compassion can help bridge the gap between their past and the future they deserve. Reach out, listen, and be a part of their journey to healing. As the courtroom session drew to a close, a profound sense of hope and determination filled the air. Robert Lawson sat at the defense table, absorbing the weight of the moment. The decision made by Judge Alice Winters had opened a door for him, one that had been long shut. The conditional dismissal of his charges upon successful completion of a veterans treatment program felt like a lifeline, a chance to reclaim his life after years of struggle. Judge Winters looked around the courtroom, her gaze settling on Robert. "I want to emphasize that this is not just a second chance for you, Mr. Lawson. It's an opportunity for all of us to reflect on how we support our veterans," she stated, her voice resonating with conviction. "We must remember that behind every statistic lies a personal story, a human being deserving of compassion and support." The audience listened intently, feeling the weight of her words. Many were veterans themselves, and they understood the complexities of reintegration. Robert could sense their support, and for the first time in years, he didn't feel invisible. He felt seen. As the gavel echoed in the courtroom, signaling the end of the session, people began to gather around Robert. Veterans approached him, sharing their own experiences and offering encouragement. Charles, the man who had spoken out earlier, stepped forward with a firm handshake. "You're not alone in this, Robert. We've all faced our demons, and we're here to help you fight yours," he said, his voice filled with sincerity. Others echoed Charles's sentiments, sharing stories of their own battles with PTSD and the challenges of finding help. They spoke about the importance of community and the bonds formed through shared experiences. Robert felt a surge of gratitude wash over him. He had spent so long feeling isolated, but now he was surrounded by people who understood. "Thank you," Robert finally managed to say, his voice thick with emotion. "I never thought I'd find support like this." The warmth and solidarity in the room seemed to lift a weight off his shoulders. It was clear that this was more than just a legal decision. It was the beginning of a journey toward healing. In the days that followed, the support continued to pour in. Organizations dedicated to helping veterans reached out, offering resources and guidance to assist Robert in his transition. He was connected with a caseworker who would help him navigate the Veterans Treatment Program. The prospect of therapy and a stable place to live felt daunting yet exhilarating. As Robert began attending sessions at the program, he found himself surrounded by others who shared similar stories. They convened in a safe space, where they could talk openly about their experiences without fear of judgment. The camaraderie was palpable, and for the first time, Robert felt he was part of something larger than himself. With each session, he slowly began to confront the trauma that had haunted him for so long. He learned coping strategies and ways to manage the memories that had kept him awake at night. The road was challenging, filled with moments of vulnerability and pain, but Robert was determined to push through. Meanwhile, Judge Winters remained involved in Robert's progress. She took the time to check in with him through his caseworker, ensuring that he was receiving the support he needed. Her commitment to helping him reminded Robert that there were people in positions of power who genuinely cared about his well-being. One day, during a group session, Robert found the courage to share his story. As he spoke about his time in the military, the friendships he forged, and the pain of losing his family, he felt a sense of liberation. The room was filled with nods of understanding, and he could see the empathy in his peers' eyes. It was a cathartic moment, one that solidified his resolve to heal. Over time, Robert began to rebuild his life. With the help of the program, he found stable housing and re-established contact with his daughter. Although their relationship was fragile, the act of reaching out was a significant step for both of them. He longed to be the father she deserved, and he knew it would take time and effort to mend the wounds of the past. As Robert continued to navigate his journey, he also became an advocate for other veterans. He started to share his story publicly, emphasizing the importance of seeking help and not suffering in silence. He spoke at community events, encouraging others to support veterans in their own lives. His message resonated deeply, inspiring others to take action and reach out to those in need. As you reflect on Robert's journey, consider how you can contribute to the well-being of veterans in your community. Your compassion can make a significant difference in their lives. Whether it's through listening, volunteering, or advocating for better resources, you have the power to help bridge the gap for those who have served. Remember, every act of kindness counts, and together, we can create a supportive environment for our heroes.